couple of David's mighty men, who are Gibborim, come from the same areas that some of the judges do. So David had Netophaonites. Nehemiah lists Netophaonites 3 times as singers. Okay, were they singers or were they Gibborim mighty men? So then David, in his 30 from Ziklag, he had some sons of Korah. Sons of Korah wrote 5 or 6 psalms, and all the psalms are battle psalms. Psalm 45:3 literally says, "Gird thy sword, O Gibor." So can you imagine how that battle line looked of these giants singing as they're approaching, and then going back and writing psalms about it?
Welcome to the War Room. My name is Kyle Milholland, and thank you for joining me on the Word of War. So my guest on the show today, or I should say return guest on the show, is my friend Adam Farris. So Adam, thanks for coming back, man. Really appreciate it.
Man, I appreciate you having me back, buddy.
Yeah, so if you guys are seeing Adam, hopefully you've already watched the first show, so by the time this actually comes out, you'll actually have already seen Adam one other time under the Tinfoil Hat Club. So we had a discussion, and the backstory there is Adam actually sent me this awesome graphic novel that he actually wrote called 5 Stones. Him and another guy who's actually his graphic artist. So who's your graphic artist? I forget what his name was.
Stephen Kurth.
Yeah, awesome. Both of you guys together, just between the writing and the graphic art, phenomenal. I can't recommend it highly enough. But it was an awesome gift that he just sent me, just to have a conversation starter. And then he has a huge passion for digging into the Word of God and then using that writing ability and then Stephen's graphic art ability to put together these amazing drawings and amazing stories that, just enhance the Word of God and make it more visual for someone to be able to, kind of consume it that way if that is your thing. So Adam is also recently, as we were talking before we hit record, he's got some new ventures going on as far as a YouTube page that he's got up and putting some stuff up there. So please do, by all means, share your YouTube handle with everybody.
Yeah, YouTube, Adam Farris.
Awesome. So yeah, check him out over there. And then what's some other places that you would like to send him to, Adam?
Yeah, my blog, eadamfarris.substack.com, and I'm working on publishing right now. The book, by this time it comes out, it won't be available there, but at 5stones.bigcartel.com. We're trying to get that onto Amazon and get it out into more hands and stuff like that. Awesome. Instagram as well, Instagram, eadamfarris. Post a bunch of stuff on there as well.
Cool. And we will have a guest tab for him on our website. So if you head over to thewordatwarmedia.com, you'll actually click on guests and you'll be able to find a tab that has all of his links on there, a bio, and then access to be able to get any of the books that he has available. So I appreciate you joining me again, man. It's good to talk to you.
Yeah, no, man, it's awesome, man. The title of the show kind of fits for what's going on in the news right now.
Boy, you're not kidding. It's funny. It's so funny, man. I can't tell you how many times on doing this show, and doing podcasting now for coming up on, I guess it's coming up on 2 years here in a little bit. How many times God has lined up conversations or something just with perfect timing. God's timing is always perfect. Mm-hmm. So, and much to our conversation, I won't share with everybody before we hit record. Let's hope and pray God's timing is indeed perfect, right? Which
exactly.
We know it is. It's just hard from the human perspective, but yeah, man, what a fitting conversation given the crazy insanity that is the current state of the world, right?
Dude, and it just reminds me of, and I'm not getting into the political stuff. That's not my lane, but it just makes me think of First Kings and Second Kings, where literally Israel was good, they were doing good, then they were doing bad. And they were doing kind of good, they were doing good, and they were doing really bad. And it just was a roller coaster. Yeah. So it's like, for anybody, I'll just say this is my one opinion on the thing. For anybody that's focusing on the mainstream media and all that crap, like God is God, Israel and people are different. You can't put them together and say this is one group. No, God is awesome, and we are not. It doesn't matter where we are, who we are, where we're from. We are wretches. So don't let that sway your opinion on God.
Yeah. spend more time in your Bible and reading God's word than you do on social media and with mainstream media, please. You'll save yourself. Obviously for the show, you know, I spend time on social media, and I will tell you the one that I think is absolutely the most destructive and the most divisive is actually X. Man, X will absolutely light your candle and just make you want to go up and blow up the world, man. It is just insane what happens on there. It is just absolutely fanning the flames of the fire.
Dude, the keyboard warrior and that you know, it's just like road rage and you know, and like you're you wouldn't walk really, really close to somebody. You know what I mean? And you wouldn't generally cut people off, you know, but when you have that security, and it's just like the computer too, you know, like you see something and you just let it go and it doesn't matter, you know, because there's no repercussions, but it's just like adding to gross amount of negativity.
No, it is, man. It's just absolutely destructive. So, yeah, then obviously this whole area, like you said, it's very cyclical too. Because if you look at the Word of God, just to summarize in 20 seconds, this could be fun to kind of get to this point. Is that is the pattern that you see throughout the entire Old Testament. Is the closeness to God, the falling away, the closeness to God, the falling away. You know, we see it in the garden. We have the first fall, and then we see it with Genesis 6. We have another fall, and then we see it after the flood. Here we've reset everything, right? We're back to good. And then we have the Tower of Babel, and you can see how people just, again, we fall, right? And then we go and we choose the Israelite nation eventually is what it boils down to. And then, you know, they wind up falling and splitting. And then you have the northern kingdom get taken by the Assyrians and scattered to the six winds. And then, you know, everybody's behaving for the most part. And then we just can't help ourselves. So then God's like, okay, well, you guys are going to go the way of the southern or the northern kingdom then. So, you know, then we get to after kind of David and we have, you know, Judah and Benjamin where the Babylonians come in and basically take them into captivity. And then they are there for, what is it, how long were they there? 70 years, I think?
Yeah.
Something like that. Imagine that. 70 it comes up kind of often in the Bible. So then they get back and they're like, we're going to behave. You know, they go back and they get released and then inevitably they fall away again. And thus, you know, why God's like, okay, we got to do Jesus. You know, there's just no way to save everybody.
And like with my research and what we'll talk about is like the whole big thing about getting the promised land, right? Like they sent 12 spies in, they came back and were like, it's crazy. Yeah. It's crazy. And they go through all of what they do to get there, which, you know, I'm summarizing, we'll get into it, for them just to intermarry with those tribes later on.
Yeah.
And like, and not take how severe that is as you know, as a repercussion, and just constantly intermarrying with the tribe, like the whole big thing. You went through all this to get to the promised land.
Yeah.
And look what you did.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, and that's the lion men and the dog men and all the crazy stuff. And it's just like, again, like, come on, man. Yeah. Like, jeez.
I always think of the Willie Nelson song, Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Be Cowboys. But in this case, it's Mamas Don't Let Your Babies Grow Up to Marry Canaanite women.
Yeah.
Because they're basically telling them, like, don't go marry the Canaanite women, man. Don't go intermingling with all these things that God has told you to basically wipe out, you know, like, to eradicate. And they can't help themselves.
No, David, oh my gosh. He, you know, and just, yeah, it's just so crazy. And that's what has been really wild for me too, is how much I don't know and how much the story, I don't want to say was told wrong, but like how out of context my understanding of what the Bible is supposed to say is. You know, the Genesis 6 thing, it's not just a couple lines and like, I wonder if something crazy happened. My research and where I'm at, and especially like we were talking about before that we started recording with the judges, is humans were absolutely changed. And the entire Old Testament is just craziness, literally, of God trying to wrangle this little beast. Yeah. Of like, all right, I made humans and all this stuff keeps coming in and changing them. And it's like, you know, he would have the battle and he would have this and he would have that. But it literally was that just to keep humans human.
Yeah, that's right.
You know?
Yeah, we don't often think of that, but that's very true.
Yeah, I mean, it's just blowing my mind, man, of how, like, it's there, like Gideon, and it literally calls him mighty man of valor. In old Orthodox Jewish, that's Gibor HaShavel.
Mm,
So that comes from the Nephilim line. That
Gabor.
whole yes, that whole Gibborim. I think Gibborim sounds really cool,
Yeah, no,
but
right. Yeah.
but nonetheless, that's what happened.
Okay.
God made Earth, angels come down, changed us, and then the rest is history. And it was literally just trying to keep it in lanes of like, all right, you don't need to be 20 foot tall, and you don't need to have lion blood, and
Yeah, I know, right? It's crazy. Yeah,
yeah,
one of the things that I was going to ask you, just mentioned, and I just get your take, is it seems to be too, like, and I know it's been not that long actually. I know we tend to think of what we have now has been around forever, but that's very rarely the case. Most of the time, it's been concocted somewhere along the lines. And one of the things that has really corrupted the church now, first of all, if the church talks about Genesis 6 at all, that's a miracle in and of itself. But when they do, it's always kind of passed off. If they have to cover it, a lot of times it's passed off as this Sethite view, right? Where it's, you know, the intermingling of two human lines that magically produce giants. The Sethite men, I think, were marrying the daughters of Cain, right, and this and that, and then magically produce giants. And that, for anybody that maybe has been taught that view, would highly encourage you to go back, listen to the show today. Highly encourage you to do some study on that. Go back, read your Bible, and whatever Adam and I say today. I've said this on the show a million times. Don't take our view for it, right? The whole point of the conversation is to drive you back to your Bible and go find out for yourself. But don't just parrot what you've been taught and told. Go in and actually spend some time in the Word of God with a heart to learn what God says about things versus what man says. But yeah, that Sethite view just seems to be such a problem because none of it makes sense if you kind of look at everything through those lenses.
well, that's exactly it. And I'll make a really quick example to tie in with the Sethite, just for an for an example. During David's while he was accruing his mighty men, you know the story of Nabal and Abigail. David's men go to Nabal and they say, "Hey, we haven't had any trouble. Can you help us out?" And it says that he was churlish and evil, and he is a Calebite. He says no, and it's a whole big thing, and he ends up having a heart attack. David and his men were coming back to kill the guy, essentially, because he just like really disrespected David. And then David ends up marrying Abigail, blah blah blah. But it says that in normal translation, it says Nabal was a great man. He had a bunch of sheep, and he came from Carmel.
Hmm.
Well, when you dive in, and this is what you were talking about, you got to read, man. The boring parts of the Bible
Yep. Aren't boring.
are not boring parts. They are the details. It's
Amen.
just a huge story. Like, you can't put it all together. So anyway, so in Orthodox Jewish, he is an Ish Gadol from Carmel. Now, Gadol, talking about Jonah, Gadol is a word that emphasizes size. So Jonah was swallowed by a Dagadol, a fish of great size. Abram and Ishmael were promised to be over Goy Gadols, nations of great size.
Hmm.
So Nabal was a man of great size from Carmel. Carmel is one of the promised land areas that they conquered. And a bunch of the tribes were left over. A lot of them. Gershurites, Maccathites, Anakim giants, Jebusites, and then a bunch of like smaller tribes. They were allowed to commingle. So that's what they were saying was, we haven't had any trouble. Can you help us out? Meaning,
Yeah.
you were supposed to go, dude. And that right there is one tiny little example of, and then when it mentions that he was a Calebite, because Caleb comes from, that's the dogmen stuff we'll get into. And the emphasis every time you see Calebite is the emphasis of like a really gruff person. So, and it makes sense when you know the story of Caleb and, him kicking giants' butts.
Yeah.
So that's just one little, you know what I mean? Little tiny little example that just
Interesting.
changes the story completely. So Nabal, Naaman, and Barzillai are all Ishgadals. And in their, in their own different little stories. more giants. So, you know what I mean? So like
Yeah.
that's going to change, really, really change the context of all the stories and the people and the places and the events when you really have the full details. And that's the man, I'm gonna tell you, it's hard to get through some of that stuff, but it's all pertinent. Like the Adam son of Bill from da 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 da.
Hmm.
That's what you use to track to find these people, right?
That's
That's how
right.
you know Carmel is a bad place and that dude was leftover giant.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
Every detail is important. And a lot of times you just nailed it. What I have found the more I study, while it's boring, on the surface, you're like, oh, this is boring. I don't need to know so-and-so's dad and so-and-so's dad. Yes, you kind of do, because that
Mhm.
tells you, like you said, that genealogical thread tells you so much that we kind of sometimes take for granted. The other thing too, that we do not do, a lot of times in church and just in general, when you're studying the Bible, man, use those maps in your Bible. Use those maps because you need to know the geography. Geography, along with the history and the genealogy, helps you understand so much better what is actually happening, because you have much better reference of where things are.
Mm-hmm.
Like we were kind of talking before we hit record, and I've been doing a study on the House of David, series that's out.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that I did was try to incorporate a little bit of lead up history, because it really obviously goes back to how we wound up here. We kind of need to cover the how we wound up here, right? Because they kind of just drop you in the middle of, David's a boy, he's out tending the fields with the sheep, and then literally like one chapter before David and Goliath. So we've missed a lot of stuff that's led us up to this point, right? A ton of stuff. So, but the other thing too is, I always thought growing up that, the Philistines were just one great big huge people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not really the case. You've got 5 separate kingdoms inside of Philistia that you need to know. And when you see the geography and how everything lines up, it's kind of shocking. And a lot of people don't know this, but modern day Philistia is actually Gaza. Gaza is basically incorporated into what was the Philistine territory.
Mm-hmm. What I've found on Philistines, to your point, it's all so awesome you brought it up, is how complex that is. Same with the Amalekites and all these other tribes, because they didn't really they had basic understanding of that stuff back then. I mean, it's different, but the David's personal bodyguards, the Cherethites and the Cherethites and the Pelethites. So they are technically a branch of Philistine.
Interesting.
Technically, right? Now, the Orthodox Jewish version refers to the Cherethites as Cretans from
Mm,
Crete. So, what was happening? That what we know of what was happening is imagine it like 10 times more than that. You know what I mean? Because like
yeah.
literally, the sea people, and that's probably the best way to say it, was just groups of people were just going out and conquering and grouping together or not grouping together.
Hmm.
Because there's times where the Cherethites and Perethites, or Pelethites, are mentioned with Philistines and then not. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, dude, yeah, that's a great point too of how complex some of these tribes are, and that too with the research is you got to really dig deep and see if they do come from that tribe or like the Benjaminites who are just bad dudes and they
Yep.
just cohabitate and spread a lot of Nephilim genealogy. A bunch of David's mighty men come from Benjamite tribes or Benjamite areas.
Yeah.
And then, like the Gadites, he had 11 lion faced men from Gad. So it's like, that's just a whole nother, how did that get in there? Like,
Yeah. Right.
So, yes, man, it is so complex. And like, you know, Gibeonites, how they're a good, they're remnants of Amorites. Amorites are good, and then they're really bad, but then they're tribes of Amorites that are good. So yeah, it's like tongue twisters, man.
It's extremely confusing. Even for me, you've got Amalekite, you've got Amorite, you've got Ammonite, you've got all of these different, tribes that are very similar name, and it can be hard, man. It can be really hard to kind of keep track of all this stuff, but it's even one of the things that's been really great, like doing the study for me. It's been great for me to get in there, because the Old Testament I'm getting much stronger in, but I'm not strong in the Old Testament. I'm getting there, because the more I study, the more it unlocks and more makes sense for other things, right? Mm-hmm. And you need to know the backstory in order for a lot of this stuff to make sense. Like when we say Moabite or Ammonite, what that actually means, where those geographically are, and the fact that David came through the Moabites, mm-hmm. and the Moabites were products of incest ultimately, both the Ammonites and Moabites, which really goes all the way back to Sodom and Gomorrah. So when Lot fled with his wife and daughters, obviously wife turns around, gets turned into a pillar of salt, and the two daughters, they wind up fleeing to Zoar, which is on the south end of the Dead Sea. And they wind up, afraid that everybody there knew that they had fled from Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So they're afraid that, people are going to find out. So then they flee to the caves right behind Zoar. And we found the caves. We know where they are. We can go there and do all these things and check it out even today. But the daughters were afraid they were not going to be able to procreate or find men to marry them. So they get their dad drunk 2 nights in a row, and each one goes in and sleeps with him. And they both get pregnant. And from that incestual encounter, one has a son named Ammon, and the other one has a son named Moab. And so you have the Ammonites and the Moabites. And David, through his lineage, is actually a Moabite. Mm-hmm. So which in turn means Jesus has incest in his history.
Which is crazy. So the angels that blinded everybody in Sodom, yes. Like going way back to the beginning of that.
Yeah.
It says they blinded everybody small and great. In Hebrew, that's Katan and Gadol, meaning everybody is small size, everybody of great size.
Interesting.
So that puts Nephilim there. So we have that. Lot was single all the way up until Sodom. That's where he marries his wife. So he marries tainted blood. So then his children, that's tainted blood. Now that incest, now I wasn't there, so right, this is my I guess opinion on it, but the incest was enough of a stressor to kick off the what was in the genes, thus causing lion-faced men. And atavism is an actual trait that we have where benign traits, benign genes can stay in us, never happen, never occur, or under a stress. You see people grow tails or like weird features or just mental illnesses. So our DNA is super complex. And that's really, if I had to sum up my research and how I look at the Bible now, that's how it is Gen 6 happened and then humans were changed. And it's not that giants are bad and giants are horrible and that's what killed everybody. No, we were just changed, and it was the people and the place that was bad. It was so like there was Obed Edom is a Gittite, Goliath's a Gittite, but Obed Edom is good, and he's actually in the temple. He's part of the Show Aram. So this is really crazy. Like he was part of the Show Aram. David and Samuel the seer appointed that specific duty in the temple. The Show Aram or the porters in the King James version, but it's the gatekeepers of the temple. So you're telling me that you appointed a giant that you can trust to be the gatekeepers? Okay, I dig it.
Yeah.
Ornan the Jebusite, the threshing floor. Remember David did the census and he had the 3 plagues. Well, that landed on the threshing floor of Ornan the Jebusite. And this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the boring stuff. Certain things are meant for you to research what it means and not a name. Like Jebusite is not, it was a Jebusite and blah. No, they were the down tramplers, troddeners of men. Certain things are meant, the Bible's a parable, and it's meant to be studied, or really, really deeply studied. And some of that, they're telling us that this was craziness, but it's in like Hebrew, right?
Yeah.
The Girgashites. Girgashites are one of the tribes from the Promised Land that had to go, and they were even mentioned to Abram before he even went on the journey. Well, Girgashite means dwellers in a clayey soil, to take and to grab. So they were people they were underground dwellers that would grab people, and like Mordors and Time Machine, right? Archites, that means gnars, like teeth, heavy teeth. So
Yeah.
if you knew who these people were, like it's a completely different story. Like absolutely, how were Amorites? Abram, the burning bush, was at the Oaks of Mamre. Mamre was an Amorite giant. You know that. Now, we even talked about that last time because it's just a crazy story. But Mamre's brothers, Eshel, Valley of Eshel, is where they found the grapes. And that's something too with research in the Bible is sometimes it's like I'll say like Valley of Craftsmen is from Sariah, Othniel's brother, which is just literally just craftsman. But then you've got we talked about it, Valley of Hinnom, which is an actual person. So it's like Valley of Eshel, Oaks of Mamre, Oak of Moor. They are from Amorite giants. So like you really got to get in there and dig to find the true story of these, man.
Yeah, you do. You've hit upon some things that I'm like, what? Get out of here. Yeah, it's so interwoven. These threads are so interwoven, and it's so cool when you start to pull on them, because you start to piece things together and make things connect that you didn't realize, and it just makes things come more and more alive for you. Because really what you have is you have thousands of years at this particular point of intermingling that's happened. I mean, imagine humanity, over that much time, and how much, crossbreeding and inbreeding, and all these different things are happening, and how twisted things can get. And that's why God's instruction to them when they go into the promised land is, man, you got to get rid of this stuff, because I don't want it corrupting you. You're my people. I'm trying to, it's basically what you have is you have God effectively trying to have them do what he did with the flood. Which is to purify things, right, and wipe it clean, so we don't have all this. And then inevitably, much to your point at the beginning of the show, we just have mankind that just can't help himself and just starts to, pollute things, and it just becomes a mess.
Like, here's a crazy one with the Gibeonites. And this is really wild. When I put this together, man, it kind of blew my mind. So the first time we meet the Gibeonites is in Joshua. And you remember the story when the word has gotten out, the Israelites are kicking butt in the promised land, and everyone's kind of scared or doing whatever. And the Gibeonites, they put clothes on, and they pretend to be something else, and they trick Joshua into like a peace treaty kind of thing. Well, it backfires, and they end up getting lifelong. It's called tributary, where it's forced labor to the temple. So lifelong. This is your consequence for what you did. Lifelong tributary to the temple. Specifically, they were woodcutters and water carriers. When you're reading the Bible and you get to a detail that does not make sense, it makes sense on a
start digging.
dude. So Solomon makes the molten sea. You're familiar with the molten sea?
No, I'm not. Please explain.
Oh, so it's just like, it looks kind of like a chalice, but it's gigantic, and it was pre-baptism. It was a cleansing, like a priestly cleansing pool.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like a cup when it's in big, like surrounding area where they can touch in it. And it says that it was 5 cubits high. Now, the argument with cubit and royal cubit.
21, 18, who knows?
Right. So at minimum, this thing's like 10 or 11 foot. And I'm probably like really wrong on that, but there's a point to this. So you backtrack. Who do we have in the temple that can carry water? The Gibeonites.
Yeah, there we go.
So the Gibeonites are lifelong tributaries to the temple as woodcutters and water carriers, and they are speculated to have been the ones responsible for filling Solomon's molten sea.
Hmm.
And as a manager, what you do, what I do, how I was trained before I tackled anything was I would count my resources, meaning like how many people do we have, who can do what different jobs and stuff, and you don't sign up to more than what you can do. So it sounds to me that Solomon, because it says it later that he had 70,000 stone carriers and 80,000 stone cutters, and he was actually doing more forced labor, more tributaries of Amorites, Girgashites, Jebusites, and stuff like that. So he already had built this, this vast workforce of giants. So look at everything that Solomon built and what he's known for. It's all huge, right? All big and ornate, and wonder why.
Yeah, right. Got these
So,
big boys working for you.
dude, and
Yeah.
those are tiny, and it might even sound a little boring. Those are tiny details, but
Yeah.
doesn't that change the perspective of the landscape?
It does completely. Yeah. It's so fascinating. You had mentioned something earlier too. I wanted to go back to. You said atavism. Is
Yes.
that the genetic disorder where you get like the wolf face people where they have hair?
Mhm.
Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting because you connected some dots for me there. Because if you think about it, you could make a really good argument that Esau had atavism.
Mhm.
And so what if you think about that, what you then have is, because, obviously you've got Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and Esau. So Jacob is where all the tribes come from. And then you have Esau on the other side who decides to give up his birthright for the bowl of soup. Right.
Mhm.
And you have the way he's described is, you could make a very strong case for it, that he has that atavism, which you see is, it's like, everybody's seen them where they literally have hair on their face, and they do. They like to the Bible describing person, they would probably say a lion,
Mhm.
because that's what it's going to look like, right?
Mhm.
So, but if you carry that on genetically through the bloodline, right, you're going to have that bloodline carry on through all of Esau's line. But it also means, genetically speaking, that it has to be a recessive trait, you would think, in Jacob's line as well. So it would make sense that somewhere along the lines, if you come into contact with two of these again, you're going to have that happen. Which Moabites being incestual, and all of that, it's very possible, right? It's kind of curious.
Where I'm at, man, is how can it really happen? And I look at it as, these are real people.
Mm-hmm.
It was real toenails, bad breath. It was real, real, real. So they're going to function just like we do, right?
Yeah.
Theoretically. And look at how vast humans are now, and we are thousands and thousands away from the Nephilim gene pool,
Yeah.
incident. And then we still have, oh my gosh, you got all nationalities have giant people,
Yeah.
right? Where like even this, the Chinese, the specific, you wouldn't see it, you do see it, and then you see the opposite, and then to get down to brass tacks, like where they are at the environment, like Norwegians and Hafthor
Mm-hmm.
Bjornsson and them big boys,
Yep.
colder climate, what it does to humans, and look at the tribes that they're finding in Amazon and how they're different because they've never been come in contact with this or that, and never ate processed foods and stuff. So yeah, dude, just like you got Moab is technically where lion faced men start, but then the Gadites have 11 of them that join David's mighty men. So that's just more. They could have intermarried there, or it could have been these and these hooked up, or whatever. So it was just like vastly spread. And then, I'm not an Egyptologist, but if you look at all of the Anubis and the dog head and the
Yep.
eagle head and the bird head and this and this and this, yeah, absolutely. I can see, it just being natural, or then I can see people just trying things too. Because How many times in the Bible does it say to not have sex with animals?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of a one-timer, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
I think we can chalk that up, but it says it multiple times
Yeah.
because it kept happening. And then if you look at, we don't know what our reproductive stuff will work with what animals just because we're all made at the same factory. You know, who knows? So yeah, dude, absolutely. Like it just kept spreading. And that again, growing up in the church, you always hear um, God having a problem with intermarriage.
Mm-hmm.
And that never made sense to me because it was like, well, how, how does that doesn't seem, it's not what we think it is. It was
No.
literally like we've been talking about. Just don't intermarry with these people. Y'all can do whatever. Just don't hook up with these people because
Yep.
um,
They've been
some of the
genetically modified. They've been
dude.
genetically ruined and made impure.
Yes, the Jebusites were allowed to stay over in different areas, and in certain parts of Benjamin, the Jebusites were allowed to stay over. And then you've got that gets into the judges of Jebusite blood, and it's like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
craziness, man.
it's amazing, man, because it's basically a complete mirroring of what happens back in Genesis 6. You know, the Bible doesn't really get into it, and you got to get into some of the extra biblical text to find out more information. But there is enough in the Bible for you to start piecing things together on your own, right? I mean, like you and I talked about this, I think, last time we talked. You know, because you typically tend to stay within the scriptures when you do at least your writings and stuff, which is great. But there's enough in the scripture to be able to piece this out. And one of the clues that you're going to get. First of all, Scripture tells us very clearly that everything had been corrupted. Everything, not just man, everything had been corrupted. And if you have been brought up in the church and you were taught like I was that, you know, the flood happened because we ate from a tree and then suddenly we became sinful and we just became these horrible human beings. And so God sends the flood. That is a very, very incomplete version of the real events. And it doesn't make sense when you start reading the text further, and much to your point, like you said earlier, of really peeling back into the text and going, well, that's very strange. The God's being very specific here. And it says all flesh had corrupted itself, right? Had been corrupted. But the other thing that you see is you see repeated over and over and over the instructions to Noah of like it's kind, like it's kind, like it's kind. And God is clearly saying multiple times, emphasizing the point, right? Don't bring anything on this boat. The only thing coming on this boat are things that are genetically pure, starting with you. Noah was perfect in his generations, right? I believe that is kind of speaking to potentially his genetic pool. And then all of the animals. Don't bring anything on here that has been hybridized. And there's a lot of writing out there that you can read, that you can piece together, that it seems like the events in Genesis 6 was the beginning point for where we started to genetically manipulate things and make things impure, with the design being we're going to basically corrupt mankind forever. If we can get them to all pollute everything, then God's creation is basically ruined, and bye-bye goes man. And that's just one more feather in our cap where we try to rise up and take out God, right, from Satan's perspective. And we can see this, you know, there's no doubt that they were, you know, having this happen with mankind, but then the animals were obviously being corrupted. And we see this same thing happening in this story that we talked about today. And all of the instructions are basically, don't do these things because this is what was done before the flood. I'm telling you this because you guys are so far removed from it. I'm putting it in my law. Don't do these things. And all of these things, you'd be willing to bet, were things that were happening before the flood.
Oh, dude, I got a great example. So Jephthah the Gileadite was one of the judges. Now, it says that he was a mighty man of valor. He was the son of a harlot, and Gilead begat Jephthah. Now, first and foremost, Gilead is from the Promised Land area. It is also uh, twice in the Bible there's a balsam from Gilead mentioned, and it translated it becomes medicine. So this is like this is renowned medicine from Gilead. But so the mighty man of valor, it is Gibberim, right? So we got that. But the harlot thing, this is really crazy. The actual translation is in Isha Zona. Now the Zona refers to a woman who has had sexual relations with someone she is prohibited from marrying, even if she was not a prostitute. So
Well,
that's
there
where
you
the
go.
harlot, it's a mistranslation.
Mm-hmm.
That's where the harlot came from. What that basically is saying is Jephthah's mother hooked up with somebody you ain't supposed to hook up with. And that is what literally this story is about, is not doing that.
Yeah.
And he's and that's why he is a mighty man of valor,
Mm-hmm.
literally, because that, and it's just like Zariah, David's sister, was the same thing. Her husband, her boy's father's never mentioned because it wasn't human. Because later on, you find out Joab is a giant. Abishai is not only is a giant, he is in charge of David's top three Gibberim. So he's like a bad dude. And then Ashael, he doesn't, and you go back to what we were talking about with genealogy, he's not a big boy and he's not super strong. He's fast. But then that's what kills him, because he can outrun a chariot, but once they catch him, they can kill him. So that, you know what I mean? So that goes to
Yeah.
how of three boys, two of them got size and strength and one of them got speed.
That's interesting. Yeah. Again, we know that that's how genetics work.
Oh, dude, Gideon. Oh my gosh, this is a wild little detail, dude. So Gideon, I'll say this detail and then I'll backtrack. So Gideon, when he's doing his thing, he knocked down a tower himself. Says it. Knocked down a
Interesting.
tower himself. And then it says, I want to find this. Here it is. So it says, Judges 8, 7 through 8, he beat down the tower of Penuel and slew the men of the city. Now, those examples, there are only a few of those, is when one person goes in and conquers the city. And every single time, if you track it, it's Gibberim. But a really cool detail. Judges 8:18. Then he said unto Zebah and Zalmunna, what manner of men were they whom you slew at Tabor? And they answered, as thou art, so were they. Each one resembled the children of a king.
Hmm.
Bam. So they're saying, Gideon literally is like, well, who are those guys that you just killed? And they're like, well, they look just like you. They look like just sons of kings. Track kings. None of them are good. That's
Yeah.
why God is saying you don't need a king, you don't need government. And that's what I was talking about earlier, pre-recording, is like how unnecessary government actually is, and how
Mm-hmm.
that really is just the continuation of Nephilim, and the slavery of humankind. Um, because the Living Bible puts Nimrod as one of the first kings. And
Yep.
also, that is why King Agag in the David story, why he had to go. Because if you remember in Esther, Haman was killing all the Jewish people, and then he had to go. Haman is an Agagite. An
Oh,
Orthodox,
interesting.
yes, Orthodox Jewish version has a number there. The first time it says it is for Numbers 24:7, which is referencing Amalek being one of the first nations and why King Agag was so bad. And it literally says how like the land will know that I'm a higher king than Agag. Because yeah, that was just like, I think that's how the Nephilim were actually. We think Nephilim, Anunnaki, and all that crazy stuff, and like gold and slavery and blah. I think that's kind of like just a shiny quarter for us to look at.
Yeah.
Because if you break down the whole Saul king thing, God was saying that like that's not supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need that. You don't need government. Look what they're doing. Look what they're doing to their people. And then look at the stories that we do have of like Chemosh and Baal and all of that crazy stuff. Like it wasn't happy. It was passing your children through the flame. And we know that when they put their kids in the flame, like nothing happened. You know what I
Mm.
mean? We know.
Right.
But in those times, they were like, "All right, hey man, we need some rain. Get your kid." And it
Crazy.
was just constantly being, yes, just tricked. And you look at to get tinfoil hat craziness, you look at how presidents are related, and then you look at Freemasonry and tracking bloodlines.
Mm-hmm.
Look at Deuteronomy 23, says that Moabites and Ammonites are not allowed in the temple even after the 10th generation. All that says to me is that some bloodlines will just continue on no matter what you do.
Yep.
And then some can be birthed out. You know what I mean? Like you can hook up with Jebusite and then later on it's out, 100 years or whatever. Ammonites and Moabites, and then you even remember in Nehemiah when they find the Mosaic Law and they start reading it, it literally says, and they looked up and they dismissed the Moabites right then and there. Because it's like, oh, y'all can't be in here, man. Y'all are tainted. You got to go.
Yeah, it's like the Moabites worshiping Chemosh, which was their god. And it's interesting, too, because some of the Jewish lore that you can actually get into, and again, for the House of David study, I got into this because I was trying to figure out where they got some of the stuff in the show, right? Because there's so much gap between things that they're trying to fill out, backstory and all this and that. And they wind up having a character called Orpah, O-R-P-A-H, I believe. And you know where I'm going here, which was Naomi's daughter-in-law. So you have Ruth and you have Orpah, right? And then supposedly, of course, Naomi's husband dies. All the two sons die, so it leaves these two. They're all three widowed. And she tells the two girls, go back to your people, because they were actually Moabites, both Moabites. And Naomi was not. I think she was, I think they were Bethlehemites. They were actually from Bethlehem. I heard her husband, I do believe. But anyway, not from there, from the Promised Land. And they had gone over there because of a famine. And Orpah leaves. And the Jewish lore is that she is actually the one that became what was referred to as the mother of the giants, and some of that backstory lore. So, who's to say how true that is? But it's an interesting thing that is in Jewish lore. That is something that I thought that they had just Hollywooded that up for the show. But that is actually, they played it based on the old Jewish lore that is written down out there, that they have, that's how that went down. Now, I don't know how accurate that is, but
sure.
It's interesting because, again, it all ties together, right? From the mixing, the genealogical mixing of things and the God worship and how all that goes down and the sacrificial stuff. I want to come back to the government thing here in a second, but I have a couple other things I wanted to go down, some other avenues really quick that you had mentioned. I didn't want to lose my place there. So let me just make a quick note for myself on that. But just one fun curiosity question. As you've been doing this research, have you been using any of the Septuagint at all to do some research?
I sometimes I can get an extra detail.
Yeah.
It's tough for me because again, this is a calling thing. So it's like no matter what I want to do, like I got to do what I'm being told to do.
Yeah.
And it is really strict on me to stay in the Bible, because that's what keeps going through my head is like there has to be one parameter of truth, right? Like in real estate, you can't set your border by a rock because the rock can move.
Yeah.
So it's like, yeah, I've gotten some stuff, but just minimal stuff. I mean, dude, like what I'm scratching the surface in the Bible is keeping me super busy.
Oh yeah, for sure. The other thing too that we've kind of mentioned that I wanted to kind of circle back to because it's very relevant for today. Oh my gosh, so relevant for today. Here we have all these, what we've been talking about really ultimately what are chimerical creatures. We have these chimerical beings that have been created that are not inside of God's purview. They have not been imbued with a soul as we would know it, right? And they are not going to be present at the end of things because they are not created under God's purview, much to that point, right? And we have all of this chimerical research that is occurring. And for people that do not know, I think a couple different countries, but I know for a fact Japan now for a few years has actually okayed. And I think my wife found something the other day where even America, I think, has okayed don't quote me on the American side, but definitely quote me on the Japanese side, where they have okayed the cross breeding and chimerical creation of animals and humans. Have you heard of this?
Oh man, right at like the day after the Kentucky Derby, I saw that they're working on like here in the States, they're working on
Oh, there you
genetically
go.
modified race horses.
Yeah.
Dude, it says it. Signs are everywhere. Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. Like if you don't, oh my god, it'd be, this is a crazy opinion, but it'd be really hard to not see what's happening right now. Like it says it in the days of Noah, man. In the
Yeah, you
days
got
of
it, man.
Noah.
We've said it several
Yo.
times. And it's so funny because everybody that has started to awaken to this stuff keeps coming back to that verse, and we see it all around us. But the problem is we have no real understanding until we get into these discussions and we start studying the Bible and getting around people who know more than we do and have studied more. And so we can sharpen our tools to be able to study to help other people. The remnant, right, is really what we're talking about, the remnant. We have no understanding of how bad things really had gotten prior to the flood during Noah's day.
Hmm?
I
So
just had no idea.
Othniel, the first judge of Israel, bad dude, tough dude. Othniel is the son of Kenaz, who is the brother of Caleb. Kenaz is a Kenizzite because they were Kenizzites. All of these tribes, the boring parts, were the tribes that are in the promised land that had to go. Kenizzites translated is hunter of men. And it's to be taken like Jesus is a fisher of men, hunter of men. So it's, you know what I mean? It was like almost like a job kind of thing. But Othniel is the son of Kenaz, a Kenizzite, and he's the first judge of Israel. Now, what does Othniel mean? Othniel translated is violent lion of God. So either he was Lion Man in some fashion, or somebody gave him a really tough name,
Yeah,
right?
it's like there's worse monikers you can have, right?
But you can't hide that he comes from the Kenizzites, and the Kenizzites were, God said they got to go. And again, we were talking about earlier, you got to translate who these people are so that you know what's going on. So the way that it goes is there's no kings, and Israel, everyone's doing what's right in their own eyes, and they fall under 8-year rule from a certain king. They cry out to God. It says God gave them Othniel. Well, Othniel was already around. So, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean like he gave him. It means he appointed him. And it says his spirit came upon him and he killed the king and all that craziness himself. So this is another example of one person doing these crazy things. And if you track who they are, they're not just a dude from Chester, Virginia.
Yeah,
you know
right.
what I mean? And he was used.
Yeah.
He was the first judge of Israel. He had a very important part in the good part of the story. So it's like what you just said made me think of it is like all signs point that that dude was not purebred human.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't stop him from being used. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier about how like it's not so simple as like giants were bad and they were all over the place. Like humans were just, it was a wild place to be alive, wild time. And then again, you keep going through like David's mighty men, a couple of David's mighty men who are Gibberim, in all sense of the word, come from the same areas that some of the judges do. So it's like, all right,
increases the chances that some of them were.
dude. And then like the Pirathonites, if I'm saying it right, they live with the Amalekites. But they are, David had 2 of them, and then we had 1 judge that was a Pirathite.
So crazy.
Right?
Yeah.
So, and I had just had another example, just went right through my head. Yeah, I got it. Check this out. So David had Netophaonites. Nehemiah lists Netophaonites 3 times as singers. 2 times as they were going to get some singers from Netophani, and then 1 time that most singers come from there. Okay, well, they were singers, or were they Gibberim mighty men?
Yeah.
So then David, in his 30 from Ziklag, he had some sons of Korah. Sons of Korah wrote 5 or 6 psalms, and all the psalms are battle psalms, dude.
Mm.
Psalm 45:3 literally says, "Gird thy sword, O Gibor."
Mm.
So can you imagine how that
Wow.
battle line looked of these giants singing as they're approaching, and
Wow.
then going back and writing psalms about it? Like,
Yeah.
dude, yo.
It's
So
it's crazy because it almost seems like it's somewhere in there, you know, God, because it's the thing that I've come to, man, you know, like obviously with this show and the book I'm working on and everything, man, it all comes down to spiritual warfare. Always. Everything always. When you get to the root, right, it always comes back to spiritual warfare. And it just seems like everything I study, it really comes down to move and counter move. Move and counter move. God will make a move, Satan moves in, tries to corrupt it. God makes a move to correct it, Satan moves in to try to corrupt it. And it's just move and counter move. And it's almost like this is kind of feels like to me one of those counter moves, right? Where the original move was go into the promised land, wipe everything out that's impure, and we're going to be good. And we couldn't do that. So then there's all this intermingling. And so then God, because, you know, Satan's going to be involved there, right? And then so God is now, this is his counter move where it's like, okay, all right. Well, we're just going to go ahead and use this stuff to wipe you out.
yeah,
It almost feels that way.
Yeah, dude. I mean, oh my gosh, like literally, that's the best way to say it. It was like, all right, well, I'll tell you what, I got you. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm gonna use some of these guys then,
Yeah.
and then you're like David accruing. So he had 37 were his top guys. He had 3 top guys. It was 37, and then he had 30 from Ziklag, and then he had his royal council. All of them, like a person in his royal council was his name was Adoram, translated as Lord of Height, and he was over David's tributaries. So all his forced labor from all of these conquests were under the Lord of Height. You know what I mean? Yes, yes. So and then like of David's the journey when he was accruing these 37 is an awesome story, and he's bouncing back and forth. But when he goes back to Gath, he wins favor of the king of Gath, and Gath gives him Ziklag. We know Ziklag from other parts of the story were like Amalekites and Edomites, just really bad people. Well, he gives them the land, and then he gets, like I said, the 30 from Ziklag, or just, and one of them is Ismaiah, who is a mighty man among the 30, and he's a Gibeonite. So it goes back to Gibeonite. We're talking about the water cutters and water carriers.
Yeah. It's so crazy, man. You need like a flow chart and it would just look like a
Dude.
It's like this. It's just like this shoots and ladders after an 8.0 earthquake. It's just so twisted and crazy and turned around and upside down. It's funny too because I'm sitting here thinking as you were talking, and I'm like, all this conversation today, I'm like, man, I don't know how far in the house of David they're going to go, because I mean it's been pretty successful, so there's probably going to be additional seasons, right? And I mean they've only gone up to the point of, you know, David and Goliath is pretty much where the season ends. And so we've got all the Saul thing yet to come, you know, where Saul's going to hunt him. And then all the things we've talked today are pretty much long past the most of this stuff. And so it's like, how are you writing this? You know, how are you going to write your way out of explaining this stuff? You know, good luck with that. It could be a lot of fun, though.
Dude,
if they do it right.
Like, that's what we were talking about with my AI videos that I've been messing with on my YouTube page, is like, it's really cool to just not even worry, just go full blast and how crazy it could be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And yes, like the King's Highway story of like going to these giant kings. You know what's crazy? The King's Highway story, everyone talks about Og. We all know about Og, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we don't, and that's
Last King, for those that you don't, Last King of Bashan. Bashan is that area up, infamous with the gates of hell, which would all be up in Mount Hermon area where the Watchers descended, and his bed was like supposedly about 18 feet long. So we have very good indication that Og was a Gibberim.
Yes, and we know that one little piece of that story, and that story is crazy because that story goes into the talking donkey, like literally. So I love this story, and I had been working on this thing for a hot minute. But basically, while they're going to the promised land, they get to this point where the easiest, fastest way is the King's Highway. Unfortunately, it goes through the land of King Edom, some Canaanites, and then it's going to go right through Sion and King Og, the bad Amorites, going to go through Bashan and all that. And Israel, they were trying just to get to the promised land. They didn't want no smoke, man. So they went to King Edom. They sent messengers and were like, "Hey, can we pass through?" He's like, "Nope, I'll meet you with the sword." So they go around. While they're camping, King Arad from the Canaanite, it says that he got word that they were taking the path of the spies. So how wild is that we thought those spies got in and got out, but they were caught in some fashion. Everyone knew that they were there. So he decides, you know what? You guys came through with spies, and now you're trying to walk through our land. So he shows up and takes prisoners, and then they vow a vow, they kill him, and they're able to conquer and then keep on going. They get to Sion, same thing. They're like, "Hey, can we just cruise right through? If we mess anything up, we'll fix it." He's like, "Nope." He gets all his people come out and they battle. So then Og, being co-Amorite king, he gets word and he meets them out on the street, brings all his people. He gets decimated. So that's where we get this whole understanding of Og, because it talks about him, his bed. I think it's more of a sarcophagus, but
yeah, I would agree too. I've heard several other people say the same thing.
Yeah, the way that they talk about like joining your fathers in sleep and stuff like that. So, anyways, so that's the King's Highway story, and that's where we get Og, and we get these crazy details of Og. But if you keep reading, everyone's freaking out because all of the giant kings are getting decimated. So the king of Moab, Eklund, I think it is, or Balak, I think it is. Anyways, they go to Balaam. Balaam, the divine seer, and they're like, "Hey, can you help us out with these crazy people coming through? Can you do a curse or something like that?" Well, that's complex because I found the Dire Allah inscriptions. So in 1967 in Jordan, they were excavating, blah. Well, they found a wall and they found a piece of plaster, and they translate it. And not only does it talk about Balaam, the son of Beor, the divine seer, it references God's come to him at night. Well, what does Balaam say every time they come to him? "Stay the night. I'll give you the word in the morning."
Interesting.
And then he hops on that donkey because he's going to go on down the road to do that curse. And then that's when the donkey sees the angel.
Yeah.
Because, and we know the story from there. So think about like the context of that entire story of like, well, you've heard of the talking donkey and you've heard of Og, but it was all related. And it was all,
crazy.
It was all giants freaking out.
Yeah.
Like literally like, what do we do? So what's really cool about Balaam is so our God knows everything. He's awesome. He's the best. What does he say to Balaam? Who are these people? What do they want? You tell me he don't know that?
Yeah, right.
It kind of speaks to how he works.
Yeah.
He works with anybody and everybody. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from. And he could have done anything. He could have done anything he wanted. Instead, he's like, you know what? Like we were talking about earlier, he's like, I'm gonna play this out. I'm gonna see what we got here.
Yep.
And yeah, think about that entire story, dude.
Yeah, it's just like, how after this story, because then you have, like I said, you have the Babylonian captivity, right? And it says there, right in the text, God says, "My servant Nebuchadnezzar." And that's really head scratching when you don't think of it in the grander perspective of God using people, much to your point, no matter if it's good or bad, right? He says, "My servant Nebuchadnezzar." Well, Nebuchadnezzar was about as far from God as you could possibly get. I mean, here you have this guy who is engaged in probably every wicked thing you could ever dream of because he's the king of the most powerful empire on the earth at that particular time. First, you had the Assyrians, then you have the Babylonians, and he's the head of the Babylonians. But God uses the Babylonians and he warns Israel. He's like, if you guys don't straighten up, you're going to go the way of your northern brothers. And they just couldn't get it together. So God uses Nebuchadnezzar to punish them and to take them into exile. But then later on, he has Nebuchadnezzar goes crazy, right? Winds up, away from the kingdom for, I believe, 7 years.
7 times shall pass.
Yep, exactly. And all intents and purposes, when you read the Bible, you can make a really strong argument that Nebuchadnezzar actually got right with God and repented from everything. And we may actually be chatting with the boy in heaven someday, which is a crazy thought, but it's very possible. But much to the point of how God uses every single thing, right? Move, counter move. It's always the case, and it's so cool. The other thing, too, is, you were kind of talking about the King's Highway. When we go back and we look at the Exodus, it even says in the Exodus account on the flip side of all this story, when they were coming out of Israel, God actually had intended to take the trade route out of Egypt, right? Because if you look at where they were, all of the choicest land, the land of Goshen that they were actually given by Joseph because that he was their ancestor, that's how they wound up there, all is up by the top of the Nile where the Nile meets into the Mediterranean up there. And the quickest way out was along the trade route, which is pretty much due east. But God even says in the Bible that he decided not to take them that way because they was going to run them right through Philistine and right through Canaanite territory. And he knew they were going to get attacked. And he said, I think he even says in the Bible that they didn't have the stomach for it.
Yeah.
And he knew they wouldn't, which makes sense because we were talking, I think, before we hit record about, here they literally get through the Red Sea event, like right after that. And they're back to whining again that they want to go back because you just brought us out here to starve and, die of thirst and everything else. So it's just kind of amazing on that front, how God does everything and orchestrates everything.
And I have a really, a really weird thought about that. So, and it ties into, and we don't have to go into it, but it ties into like Revelation and stuff and how like all descriptions of Middle East, Egypt, and all that stuff is wilderness and lush vegetation. And it's just constant. And then Revelation is when it talks about ruin and decimation and stuff. So you're telling me that these 20,000, because it was big. I think it was literally 20,000 Israelites, during the Exodus, were walking through the wood and they couldn't find no birds, no animals to eat. They couldn't find nothing. There was plenty there. They weren't in the right headspace. They were slaves. They were used to not thinking. So to your point, God's like, man, you're not ready. You go through, it ain't gonna be good. And that's how I look at it, is like they were begging, they were complaining about food and water. You tell me there was no food and water there? Like literally, like the entire Bible talks about how lush that entire area was. The promised land was flowing with milk and honey, right? They couldn't find nothing. Like, no. There's more to that. And that's exactly what it was. It's just not mentally ready,
Yeah, we track this pretty good, and you can actually track this for yourself when you go read the Exodus story too. It's kind of fascinating. Which the first thing we see, like that was one of the history lessons to lead up to the House of David thing, was explaining the Amalekites, right? Where these people come from. And the Amalekites were the first people to attack them, once they get away from Egypt. And like it happened almost right away. Get over the Red Sea and pretty much get jumped by the Amalekites, almost right away. And what you find out when you really examine the story and you really look at all the evidence, physical evidence we have, they actually crossed the Red Sea kind of at the northeastern fork of the Red Sea. It's actually the Gulf of Aqaba. They crossed over there. And it makes so much sense because we've been taught that Mount Sinai is in the Sinai Peninsula and all this and that. And it's not. It's just not. It's just not accurate. It's actually over across in Saudi Arabia. And it actually says in Galatians that Sinai is in Arabia.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you go look, it's kind of interesting. But all of that, even today, when you go zoom in on Google Maps, it'll actually say the wilderness of sin. But you've got the split rock of Horeb over there. You've got Jabal al-Lawz, which is actually probably the true Mount Sinai. And that whole area, when you go and you can even look in your Bible as your maps, that fork, once you cross that top right fork, the Gulf of Aqaba, and you get over there, that is the land of Midian. And we know that Moses' father-in-law was Jethro, right? Priest of Midian. Moses actually fled to Midian when he fled the kingdom. So he was 40 years old, right? Kills the Egyptian, flees the kingdom. He flees all the way over to Saudi Arabia, effectively what we refer to as Saudi Arabia today, Arabia back in the day, and is in Midian for 40 years, and then goes back and brings the people out, and then wanders around in the desert for 40 years because of the disobedience, right? And then winds up on, what was the name of the mountain that he winds up on? And he's overlooking the promised land. I always forget.
Mount. No, because they go to Mount Hor, and that's where Aaron dies. I can't. I know what you're saying.
It's basically they get up there, and he's not allowed to go in the promised land, right? And he has to go up on the mountain, and he has to look. He's right there, He's like, I can't go in. This is as close as I'm going to get, and then hands everything over to Caleb. Caleb and Joshua ultimately to go in and take care of business, but. Yeah, it's kind of fascinating. They actually believe there's some history there. If you go and read Maccabees, it's kind of fascinating. And I haven't read Maccabees all the way. I need to get back in there and take a look. But and I know we're kind of deviating off, but it all ties together at the end of the day, much to your point earlier. The account in Maccabees is interesting because it's that same mountain that is right on the edge of the Promised Land. It's kind of on the northern portion of the Dead Sea. Where it actually says in Maccabees they took the Ark of the Covenant and hid it in that Mount Nebo. Mount Nebo, I believe is what it is. It's Mount Nebo, and they hid the Ark of the Covenant there. And I think it was Jeremiah. I think Jeremiah was the last priest before they got taken into exile in Babylon. So the Babylonians never got it, and then it's never mentioned again. So. Who knows if that account's true or whatever the case was, but it's just kind of all interesting and fascinating when you talk about it from a history perspective. But it's all tied together, man. Dude.
Yeah, it's nuts.
So yeah, it's the Rephaim, and the Canaanite thing. So that was something else I was going to say. Had a great talk with Brian Godawa, and I don't know how much you got into this too in your studies, but we had a great talk with him on the Rephaim, and the Rephaim and the Canaanite literature that he has actually found talks about how Sheol, the underworld, was actually to them, that would be the equivalent of their heaven. That was a place of welcome and where all the kings were celebrated. If you head down to the underworld, that was going to be the party of the Rephaim kings.
No, thank you.
Yeah, right. But that makes sense, right? Doesn't that make sense? Because we see the same thing in Egyptian, belief system, ancient Egyptian belief system. They've got this whole thing. That's why they're taking all these provisions with them into their tomb, so that they will have all these things to basically have a cushier afterlife.
Well, doesn't what is that? The drawing of hell? I can't. Man, it's just out of my head. I can't think of what it's called. Dante's Inferno.
Oh yeah.
Isn't one of those levels level of giants?
Yeah, well, it talks about there's discussion in the Bible too where it talks about God is basically telling them and basically taunting. There's a taunt that's out there talking about how your bed is going to be a bed of worms. It's not. He's basically what he's doing is he's telling them, you guys think you're going down to have Partyville, and that it's going to be the same kind of lie concept of you go and you do and you're Muslim and you go and you kill everybody, you're going to get all these virgins in the afterlife, right? It's just this total lie. It's not true. It's the same thing, right? It's the same exact thing. And these guys are thinking that they're going to go have a party, and God is actually taunting them and telling them, through man that's recording this, that you guys think you're going down to have a party, but guess what? That's not going to happen. You're going to actually be sleeping on a bed of worms because it's awful down there. And really, Christ outlines the underworld very clearly, and I think it's Matthew 18, where he clearly shows he's actually giving a teaching, and this is something that's been lost to us today, that is very common knowledge for the people of the time, was how Sheol, what we would say is hell, which hell is horrible because it's just this like broad strokes of, all the afterlife. Yeah. It's terrible. Yeah. But Sheol is separated into 2 compartments. You have paradise and you have torment. Well, these boys are going to torment, like everybody else. Like if you don't believe in God, you're still going to torment, until the end days. That's why it says hell is going to be emptied into the lake of fire, right? Mm-hmm. So, where paradise, the paradise side, Abraham's bosom, and that whole teaching that Christ gives in Matthew 18 has been rendered defunct. When Christ died, he descended down into the realms, into the depths, because he's human. That was part of his humanity to go there. That's what happened to every human. Well, he's in paradise, and he basically ascends. When he ascends, he takes everybody with him that's in paradise, and paradise is now rendered defunct. So when we die, we skip right over that and we go straight to heaven, right? To wait in the kingdom for the final kingdom, which will be the New Jerusalem. So it's funny because on the flip side, we get what the promise really is. And these idiots are actually spending all of their time in the fiery pits. It's like hell's waiting room, right? Uh-huh. Effectively, the lake of fire, the waiting room for the lake of fire. So, it's interesting how the Canaanite philosophy was that Sheol was a place of paradise, basically, which we see in, the Egyptian lore as well, like to that point. But, circling back a little bit, again, one of the things too that I get your take on, as you study more and more stuff, do you find it incredibly, it's almost like you kind of like smack yourself in the head, because we're taught to think the Bible is not literal in a lot of places, and it's very figurative, but it is very literal in a lot of instances. Have you found a lot of that as you've been digging? It seems like your reaction is yes.
Oh my gosh, constantly. And it blows me away how forthright it is. It's just right there. And there's plenty of stuff where it's really deep and you got to research it, but there's plenty of stuff that's right there. This whole study I've been doing on the Judges just blew me away how, the Judges is a very, very important part of the Bible and the beginning of Israel and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And they weren't all the way humans, but it says it. It literally says it. And then if you track it and you go, and it's, I got another one. It's crazy literal. So when they were getting ready to go into the promised land, you remember God says that I'll send in the hornets. What that was basically was he was going to even the odds. The hornets will distract the giants and you can kill them.
Yeah.
Well, they don't do that. Obviously, we know the story. But then Joshua was one of those guys there that heard that. He heard God say the hornet and blah. So then when they're going into the promised land, God says to Joshua, go on in, hamstring the horses, you'll be fine. It's the same pattern. So if you take that literal, why would you hamstring a horse during battle? You're going to get killed. You're going to catch a spear through the back. You're going to get your head cut off.
Yeah.
What that was they were giant animals, and they were giants riding giant animals. So that's one of those like literal things where it's like, well, what is he really getting at? No, it means if you go in there and you hamstring the horse will fall over, the giant will fall off.
Yeah, right.
And you can take care of them.
Yeah, right. So makes them easier when they're on the ground. They ain't that tall then.
Yes, and that's one of those literal things. But when you research it, it's like that's a crazy concept. And then in Psalms 22:12, it mentions the giant bulls of Bashan.
Mm-hmm.
So that's more evidence of gigantic animals. It wasn't just giants. Of course, they had giant animals and they had giant trees and forests and all that. Yeah, absolutely, man. Again, when you're reading the Bible and it's like, you just kind of like, what? Dive in.
I know. And some places it is more figurative, but in a lot of places where we think it's figurative, it's very literal. It's not that we make it more complicated because we think everything's figurative. So we go in there and we try to mangle it and twist it around in ways that it's really not. But to go back a little bit again, just to, I know we took a side tangent there and I promised we would get back to it. So this is me fulfilling the promise there on the governmental side, because this is so important. And I didn't even think about it I mean, I've thought about it before, but not really to the depth of what you had made mention of earlier about governments and how we are not intended to have some kind of governmental structure because of all the things we've talked about. The natural inclination of man, unfortunately, is not good. And when given that much power, it always typically winds up bad. And here we are. We have this completely broken system. It's completely broken.
We're responsible for 10%, right?
Yeah.
God says it. 10% is mine, right? Oh, and the firstborn.
Yep.
That's it, right?
That's
if
it.
If you read Deuteronomy and Leviticus, like the rules and the laws, that took care of everything else, right? Like something as simple as debt, it only lasts 7 years, and of course, if you're not, paying your bar, paying back.
Yeah,
I mean,
you're deliberately taking debt to just be a jerk to try to get out of it every 7 years.
Exactly. But I believe through my research and the way I feel about things, because I've always had a chip on my shoulder about government and rules and regulations. It doesn't make sense to me that you can tell me what to do. And, I'm indebted to you my entire life. Like, why?
Yeah.
So then you look at the Bible, God took care of the what do we do's because he set the laws, he set the rules, and this is what you do. And in Judges, every man did what was right in his own eyes because, and he appointed judges to take care of us. So if you take those details and then you apply that to our life, that doesn't fit, doesn't make sense at all. Why do we have to work to 65 to 67 to hope that we can have a couple of years to ourselves? No. You're telling me that God loves us so much that he sent his son to die for us, but you got to go to work every day, 8 to 5. You got to do this and this. You got to fight for that promotion. Taxes. Government needs the taxes. You got to fix them roads, man. No. So that's the dots that I've connected are everything that God warns us about and not to do is literally what the government does do to us, right? I mean, thousands of examples. And then, like we talked about with Nephilim and the background of the Bible, that's what, in my opinion, my research, that's where that comes from, was government, for lack of a better term, is slavery for humankind.
Yeah.
Right. We are in debt to it be a business that we have to prop up every day to make them rich, or it's the government officials. Why are our government officials so rich? That's disgusting.
Yep.
Right. That is just nasty that is allowed, that they can be the upper echelon and decide you shouldn't eat this anymore, or you can't have this, you can't have that. No. Well, that's, how do you keep a slave system going after the word slavery has not that it was ever good. So I don't want to say it got tarnished, but you know what I'm trying to say, right? Because what happened in the United States with slavery, that's this whole different thing, and it's not my place. But how do you continue that when that's outlawed? Income tax.
That's right.
And that's literally, dude, I mean, that's how can we as humans be the better us, have a great relationship with our God, a great relationship with our neighbor, and work together to be better people and to have things under this rule that we are? It's impossible. I paid my truck off. I did the right thing, but I still got to pay property tax on my truck. That's my truck, man. I paid it off. No, you pay your house off. You still got to pay no.
And the minute you don't pay your property tax, they're going to take your house.
Oh, dude.
Even though it's paid for.
And if you're lucky to live in a state that requires state inspections on your vehicle, like, give me a break, man. Like, you know what I mean? So it's literally just designed to hold us down and to keep us from doing stuff. What was one of the first lockdowns of COVID? Churches.
That's right.
No, you can. No, you can. That is not safe to be that close to people in the synagogue. It is just not safe. And it's like, but then we found out afterwards that they made up the mask thing and they made up the social distancing
That's
thing.
right.
Like, come on, man. So yeah, I am 1,000%. That's where my mind is, and that's what I'm trying to give to other people. It's to think, you know, the simulation conversation, you know, the Matrix. Are we in a simulation or is this the Matrix? In a sense, it
Yeah.
is,
Right.
right? Because we are under the false pretense of life. And that's kind of what a simulation would be. Now, no, we're not hooked up to stuff like Keanu Reeves, but it is not hard to find that what in the 1900s, there was this ridiculous reset. Rothschild does our education, right? Federal Reserve. I did a video on the Chicago World's Fair and Arcturus Star, free
Not
energy,
familiar.
you know. Yo, it's craziness. So the Chicago World's Fair, the 1933, was in remembrance of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair, which was technically called the World's um, Columbian Festival in honor of Christopher Columbus, which I don't buy. I think there might be some Nephilim. So what they did was they tracked the Arcturus star. Now Arcturus star is in the Bible in Job 38. In King James, it's Arcturus and its children, and in Orthodox Jewish, it's the bear and its Bantam. So it's bear and its children. Well, the Arcturus star has 54 other stars in its constellation, so that's his children. And you know, because God has everything, He made everything, everything has a place.
Yeah.
But evil takes advantage of stuff. So at the World's Fair in 1933, they knew miraculously that if in 4 observatories in the United States, when that star passed over, they could harness energy from it. And that's how they lit up the first night at the Chicago World's Fair.
Wow.
Dude, and then you look at all the pamphlets and all the memorabilia from it. Like literally it talks about the motto of the World's Fair was science finds I don't have it. Yeah, here it is. Science finds, industry applies, man conforms was the motto of the 1933 Chicago World's Fair.
Well, it sounds like that could be the 2025 Chicago Fair motto too.
So, and that just
man
that
conforms.
Just backs, yes, and that just backs my point that like this is not how things are supposed to be at all.
No, it's corrupted. It's all corrupted again. You know, basically what you see in the Bible is once God, I personally believe, and I believe I could back this up with scripture, that I do not subscribe to the theory, and this gets to be a hot button topic. I do not subscribe to the theory that Christ was ever present and ever existed right alongside of God. I do not believe that because it says firstborn among creation. I believe that Christ was actually the first thing that God created. And I think that Christ was created because God, what I have found in doing all my research is God knows all the potential outcomes, but because of free will, we choose which outcome it's going to be. That's the best way I can put it. And God knew the path that He was going down with creation, seeing the long game and knowing all the potential outcomes, that there was probably a really high probability that He was going to need Christ for Christ's purpose. And I think that is why Christ was present. And I think that's why he created Christ. And I think you can see one of the things that backs this up is you can see God time and time again, to the whole point of our discussion, trying to not have to hit the DEFCON 5 switch, you know, and send Christ, His Son, truly His firstborn Son, down to be a sacrifice. But we got to the point where he's like, I've tried everything, and you know what? We're just going to go ahead and hit the DEFCON 5 switch. We're going to get this over with once and for all. Mm-hmm. And then after that, it's pretty much like, I'm going to take my hands off. You can either choose to follow and accept the gift of salvation that my son provided, and I provided through him, or you can go have your kings. And that's exactly where we are today. We've basically had God take, the hands off a little bit. I still think that he guides, and I still think everything happens with the end in mind, right? Because it's move, counter move. So I still think there are things at play, but I think that the attempt to reconcile his people and all that was done with Christ. And it even says that, how it's been given over to everyone, right? Gentiles as well. Mm-hmm. And all of these things are just a product of us polluting the design that was created for us by God. If we just worship God, that's like, what were the instructions? Take care of the widows and orphans, right? And that's what the church was originally designed to do. But the church can't do that because the church is having to, all of the money, not from the church because it's a nonprofit, but what happens is, how does the church get its money in the first place? Well, it happens from all the congregates. And if all the congregates are being stripped of their wealth and it's being given away to people who, don't deserve it, how can we take care of the widows and orphans the way that we're supposed to, right?
Yeah.
We have this bloated monster where I wrote down earlier, one of my favorite questions to ask is, why do you need my money in taxes if you're just going to print all the money you ever need anyway?
Dude, the USA.
It's a really simple question, but it's very much on point with the fact of what we're talking about. It's like the only logical conclusion that you can come to, the only one that makes sense, is control. Mm-hmm. It's in order to keep us controlled, keep us suppressed. And the other thing too, man, and I don't know about you, but as I watch what little I do catch in the news, because we do need to stay informed on some things, as sad as it is, and you're going to find out because it's just insane how crazy it is. The amount of demonic and satanic corruption in some of these people's brains is unbelievable to me, of some of the things that are going on. And it's so much in line with the things that we can see in Scripture, where it's like, man, you guys have just been given over to a depraved spirit, man. To the point where Satan has everybody so twisted up and so confused that we are getting to a point where, as we drift further and further away and closer to truly how it was in the days of Noah, and maybe even worse, right? Much to Christ's point, I think he was kind of telling us it's going to be as it was in the days of Noah, but he also says some things that it's going to be worse than anyone had ever seen before and never will again, right? So it tells me that it's going to be as it was in the days of Noah with an asterisk next to it, if it's going to get even worse than that, which is a terrifying thought just based on our conversation today alone. And we could spend 55 million more conversations just getting into what that looked like. But this is exactly what happens when we drift away from God's word, not only in structure of government or structure of living, but also in morality. Mm-hmm. Look what happens when we decide, and we are quickly approaching a time where we will be able to completely choose anything, our own morality code. And if people think that bestiality and pedophilia and any other thing that you can imagine won't eventually be legal, you are a fool.
Well, you got to figure in Kings, every time that Israel's doing bad, how many thousands and thousands of people, they left with 20,000, right? And it just grew and 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 grew. I'm willing to, if you think about it, there were probably a good chunk of people that didn't know and were just doing what your dad did, or you know what I mean?
That's the same thing we got now.
That's exactly what it is now. Yeah. That's exactly. So like, with the thing of like a Christmas tree, right? Now we just do that. And then my kids and your kid they will always do that. Their kids will do it. Well, that started somewhere, and I'm not getting into that. But then look at like the Emmys.
We don't want to tell everyone that eventually that goes back to child sacrifice.
Like, dude, but like, look at the Emmys.
Yeah, man.
Right? And we're sitting there like, oh man, it's Emmy night. 8 o'clock, let's watch. But it's literally them doing their stuff. Dude, I watched
Satan on display, man.
and I gotta watch the time too. I gotta get them ducks in. But I watched the documentary on Astro World. The
Tavis Scott thing. That was a ritualistic sacrifice, bro.
That's exactly what I'm getting to, because they have the diagram of the stage.
Yep.
And where it happened, where the people died, was at the bottom of that upside down cross that his stage was.
Yep. Isn't that crazy?
And if you watch the documentary, as it's happening, they go through his radio and you see him on stage stop, and he's like, and just keeps going. And they literally were like, yo, we got a problem out there, man. We may have to stop. And he literally on stage was like, "Get him one more song," and kept going. Yes. And anybody can argue that and say, oh man, that's all you got. Well, Travis Scott, I don't know if you've seen that, that I think it's a watch commercial. It's it might be a cologne or a perfume. But Travis Scott does a commercial with Ellen Page. What's it? Elliot Page.
Oh yeah, whatever she's turned into now.
Right. And it was another female. I can't think of her name, but she had like it was adronologist, if I'm saying that word right.
Yeah.
And so he's like a rapper, right? He's like a street rapper and stuff. That's what we know from Travis Scott. Well, if you watch that commercial, because dude, I catch details like a mother.
Once you start opening your mind and you see it, you can't not. Dude, it's kind of terrifying, actually.
In the commercial, he leans up on Mr. and Mrs. Page. So it's like a sexual commercial. Like, well, I thought you were a tough dude, man.
Yeah.
No, you just sold your soul.
That's right. 100%.
And he also, during that documentary, right before they start talking about like what happened, they're showing an image. He's off to the side of the stage, and the projector is a big devil, big horns. And it's like, argue it now.
Well, the other thing too, like we've gotten into conversations. We've had so many good ones on this show, man. Where it's fun. I keep saying the same thing, but it's fun and terrifying at the same time to sit at the intersection of everybody's study. Right, I get to have these conversations with everyone as they come into the terminal. Right, it's all passengers on the God Express doing their own study, but I get to be the one that sits at the terminal pew and just talks to people as they're coming in, on their way passing through. And frequency and symbolism and chants and all of these things, color schemes and the whole nine, like it all just ties together. Crazy at how much it speaks to the fact that was a ritualistic sacrifice. We had 2 girls here in Indiana. I got a conversation hopefully coming up soon with somebody where he had a cousin that was ritualistically sacrificed. We got 2 girls here in Indiana, northern Indiana, that were ritualistically sacrificed. And the court system and all of the powers that be around this, man, it's dark. And they hit it, and they basically pinned it on one guy. But when you look at all the details of this crime scene, there is no doubt that these girls were ritualistically sacrificed. It was part of an Odinism cult. And that all ties back to Satanism. That's exactly what it is, man. So this stuff is real. We need to get real. The things that we read in the Bible are real, and they are happening again. They've never gone away, and they're just becoming more and more obvious. So this corrupted intermingling, like as it was in the days of Noah, what was one of the number one things that happened in the days of Noah? All this chimerical creation. Here we're doing it. We've talked about it on the show, right? And then the other thing too is the crossbreeding and the pollution of mankind's DNA. It's happening, and it's going to continue to get more and more. So yeah, it's crazy, man. It's good talking to you, dude.
Yeah, man, dude. I love it. I love it. I love it. Dr. Randall Smith says you're your happiest when you're following your calling.
Amen, bro.
Yeah,
100%. even through all the hardships, and some of the stuff we talked about before, before we hit record. Don't regret it. you know, because I know I'm doing what God put me here to do. And when you align that, when you align your God-given giftings with your vocation, man, you will never be happier. And God will do things that you can't begin to imagine. So
if one person hears me talk and
Amen.
goes back and reads the Bible, done, check it, success.
Amen. I couldn't agree more, man. You know, that's been the most rewarding thing about this. You know, like people will have emailed us and said, you know, hey, you really got me back in. I had fallen away from God, and you guys got me back in reading my Bible again. Or, you know, we've had a lot of those types of things, and man, that is the best thing. You know, the conversations are amazing. The people that we've met, you know, developing, you know, relationships with people like you and other people, it's been so awesome, you know, and I know that God's got big things planned for a lot of that stuff. And that's awesome. But that stuff there, knowing that maybe we actually save somebody from the brink of disaster, because make no mistake, everybody, time is drawing short. If you think God is going to allow his creation to be completely polluted and corrupted, it's not going to happen. Christ himself told us, if I didn't come back before things had gotten to a certain point for the sake of the elect, there would be nothing left. And we are quickly getting to that point. So it's great talking to you, bro.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, man.
Fun.
Please remind everybody again where they can check you out and all your socials and stuff. Please, by all means.
Yeah. YouTube, Adam Farris. I got a bunch of good videos on there. eadamfarris.substack.com. My writing, and Instagram, Adam Farris. Cool videos, AI, and all that wild stuff. I'm super accessible. Anybody that wants to holler, just reach out.
Awesome. Yeah, and I highly encourage you to get it again. Check out some of Adam's work, man. It's pretty awesome. So I can't highly recommend highly enough, man. It's just fantastic. Give you a little bit of he's got some art behind him, which is awesome. We didn't really talk about that too much, but you get this really cool visual representation of the Bible, which just helps the story come more alive, which is just fantastic. But Adam, thanks so much, man.
Hey, appreciate it, brother.
For all of you guys that are listening to the show, if you would help me out as well, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, comment, and most of all, please, please, please share this with everyone that you can get it to, because a lot of times they like to suppress my work because we have conversations about things that the enemy does not want to get out. So with God at our back and with you guys sharing, it just fights against the tide. So, and also if you feel really, really led and you feel like the show is worthy of it, please do give me a 5-star review on Spotify, Apple, wherever you listen to the show, and help me combat the nasties, because they like to come out too and try to tear your show down. So we need you guys to build the show up. So I'd really appreciate it. So, all right. So guys, we'll catch you next time on The Word at War. Take care.